I'd probably get through my sermon in about 20 minutes. I had some great chocolate cake in the Gleaners class this morning. And if you want to speed me up, chocolate is the instrument to do it with. The most obnoxious I've ever been in my, well, one of the times I've been my most obnoxious was kind of like when I did that. Was after half a gallon of chocolate milk and a bag of pinwheels. Let's just say it, after a while I sound like a hummingbird. Philippians chapter 1. And while you're turning there, also look in a little thing right here in your bulletin. Also causes me to lose my memory. In your bulletin, we're going to go through the Bible this year, read through the Bible. And one of the reasons why, well, it's important for the people of God to know the Word, but we're going to read it chronologically. And why is this important? Well, in the Bible laid out chronologically? No. It's laid out in the Old Testament, specifically the way the Jews would lay it out by importance and size of books, and then into certain other wisdom passages and things like that. And so one of the hard things for believers when they start reading in the Old Testament is, especially when you get to 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, you have events that kind of jump around. You know, well, I really wish they would just put this in a chronological order. Ezra and Nehemiah, it used to be one book. And there are now things that happen like in Ezra chapter 9 and Nehemiah chapter 1. And a chronological reading takes all those passages and puts them as best they can historically in a chronological line, to where when you read through the Bible, you're seeing it more in the story format of what it is that the Jews would have understood that we don't necessarily have that innate understanding of. So also to join along with you, I'll be reading along with you chronologically. And I know this may surprise some of you. There might be a week where I may not get to all my readings. And I'll tell you when I don't do that, and not this week, I've already read this, but we're going to put it in the bulletin. It's going to be on Facebook, and then eventually it's going to be on a tab right here that you can put out and put in your Bible. So excited about doing that, reading along with you. Philippians chapter 1. When I also have a lot of chocolate, I also talk really fast. So if I start doing that, if some of you will wave me down, all right? But some of you are hoping to beat the Methodists to the white meat this morning, so it's funnier when you laugh, people. It is funnier when you laugh. Philippians chapter 1, verse 27 to the end of the chapter. For some of you are going, finally, go on to chapter 2. Are you going to do this the whole time? Philippians chapter 1, starting in verse 27. Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened of anything by your opponent. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. For it has been granted you, for the sake of Christ, that you should not only believe in Him, but also suffer for His sake, engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. Right. Pick up here. We've been talking about fellowship. We've been talking about the joy of fellowship. We've been talking about Paul's arrest and how he's been with the Praetorian Guard. And last week we saw where Paul has made his claim that for him to live is Christ and to die is gain. And we talked about how we a lot of times flippantly use that. And what Paul means essentially is, you can't stop me even if you kill me. The gospel message will be proclaimed. And if I die, then I go on to be with my Heavenly Father. And if I don't, then I will continue to proclaim regardless of what you do. And how we talked about that is an unstoppable army. And then we get to be worthy of the manner of Christ's life, or be worthy, or be of one fellowship, or be of one mind, or be of one citizenry in the manner after Christ. If you've seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, came out, 10, 15 years ago. Towards the end of the movie, Tom Hanks, who was the main character in the movie, who led the squad to go save Private Ryan, has been mortally wounded, and he's leaning against a tank. And young Private Ryan, who is played by Matt Damon, thank you, that voice in the back. It's the chocolate. It's the spoiler. I'm ruining it. If you've never seen this, I'm about ready to ruin this movie for you. But that's how I roll. Matt Damon comes over and he's looking at Tom Hanks, who is dying, and Tom Hanks pulls him down and he looks the young man in the eye and he says, "Earn this. Earn this." If you go back into the movie a little bit further, he and Tom Sizemore, who is his first sergeant, are talking about saving this young man, Ryan. And they say, this Ryan had better go and find a cure for some uncurable disease. Better create a longer lasting life. Had better do something with his life. Because to be honest with you, I wouldn't trade one of the men he just lost for 100 Ryans. Paul is looking at the church and say, not earn this spiritually, but walk in a manner worthy. What Tom Hanks was telling young Ryan was, of all the men sacrificed, 5 from that squad, and the rest that were there at the bridge that helped hold that defense till they could rescue him, walk in a manner worthy of those men's sacrifice and do something significant with your life. Paul is looking at the church of Philippi and saying, walk in a manner worthy of Christ and do something significant for Christ. Be in such a way. Let's take a look at what it says here. Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ. Be of one citizenship in the kingdom of God, essentially. Let your life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Live in such a way, present yourself in such a way that not only can people tell that you are a moral individual and therefore as a moral individual, hopefully a Christian, but know in such a way that they know that you are Christian. In such a way that it is a life worthy of that of Christ. And oh wait, there's an interesting thing about Christ. He's crucified. Paul dies. And we're told to be prepared to expect sunshine and rainbows. See, one of the things that has really influenced the church, and we talked about this a lot last week, and we're going to talk about it some today, is that we have grown very casual with our culture and with things, and we've allowed the peripheral of life to become the primary. A lot of times, Christianity is sold to individuals as your life will get better. Folks, that is a concept foreign to the New Testament. You won't find that in the New Testament. Paul tells you right here, be prepared to suffer. Hebrews tells you, be prepared to suffer. Jesus says no man is above his master, and he went to the cross. You expect to do any less? All the disciples, save one, die at the hands of someone else. But yet we have a culture today that tells you Christianity is a lot like playing a country music song backwards. And I know you've heard this analogy. If you have, just smile and nod along with me so I feel good about it. If you haven't, laugh heartily for those that have already heard it. You know what you get when you play a country music song backwards? You get your wife back, the kids back, the house back, the farm back, the truck back, your dog back, your horse back, and mama gets out of jail. We love that message. Do you have a hard life? Come to Jesus and your life will get better. Your kids won't do dope and your family will be put together and your marriage won't fall apart. Come to Jesus. And we've sold it and packaged that way. And when I say we, the church universal has packaged it that way. Why? Because that sells. Come to Jesus and you'll suffer. You will not draw a crowd. Well, that's what Paul's going to talk about here in a minute. See, we like the things, and things are okay until the things begin to circumvent a life worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. See, the whole purpose of our life is to live in such a way that the gospel is proclaimed. And anything that gets in the way of that will sidetrack us to where we go off somewhere. I love watching TV. I can sit and watch me some hobbits dancing around with swords, killing dragons and things. And when the final expanded edition comes out of The Hobbit, I could literally watch Middle-earth for 24 hours in one whole day, and I would be so stoked. Okay, nerd alert. I got it. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. But if I sat in my life was nothing more than nerd alert type things, I have been derailed from a life worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's our sole focus. It's our sole purpose. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, because it's in the next following verses. That's how I know. So that whether I come to see you or I'm absent, I may hear of what you are, or that you are standing firm in one spirit. Whether I come to you or not. And he goes back to this to allude back to whether or not by my life or by my death, whether or not I live or I die, the report of you is more important for me to hear, and it's more important that you are standing firm. How? Standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. Now this goes back to that whole concept of fellowship that is a single purpose, self-sacrificing concept where everything in the life of the believer is done for the unification of the body and for the spread of the gospel message. And Paul is saying that I want to hear about your striving with a single-mindedness in the Spirit, not in the Spirit, in spirit, and striving together side by side as one man. And he gets this imagery because he's with the Praetorian Guard. And one of the unique things about the Roman legions is their shields were very effective for defense. They could interlock their shields and form this great shield wall. And if you started shooting arrows over the wall, they would raise those shields and lock them above their head to where the guy in front is covered and he's got this little gap that he can look through, and they just start marching at you like one entity. They were terrifying to every army they faced. That's why they ruled the known world for as long as they did. And their little short swords would slide out through those shields. And if you got in front of them, it was like somebody with a razor blade going back and forth and a tank just treading you under. They were effective warriors. That formation is called the turtle, I believe. And they were effective and they fought as one. Why? Because the guy to the right and the guy to the left and the guy to the right knew that their survival depended on the guy to their right and left. Folks, the believer's life and the believer's walk, survival, it depends on the person sitting to your right and left. No, I'm kidding. We are here for our own survival, and our purpose is a single-pointed purpose, or it should be. For one task, fighting as one entity. But what happens to the church is that we allow ourselves to get sidetracked. We have been in churches where politics were so high that you had many factions within a church, and the only reason why they were together is there was no group large enough to sustain the church singly. So there was a peaceful coalition of unwilling allies. That is not the church that Paul describes as something he takes great joy in the book of Philippians. Paul would not be able to recognize that church as a church. We have churches today that have so allowed the things of the world to come in, that they are no more different than the world. I think I mentioned this last week. I know I mentioned it on Wednesday night. One of the first Southern Baptist churches to make the Southern Baptist Convention, First Baptist Church, Greenville, South Carolina. First president of the Southern Baptist Convention came out of First Baptist Greenville. Has declared openly in their bylaws that they will do homosexual marriage and ordain homosexual ministers. They are not striving together as one entity with one focus, the gospel message. They are seeking peace with the world at whatever price they have to pay. And they are willing to set the text aside to maintain peace with the world. We are in a state in the United States where we are on what you would call the precipice, where society right now is antagonistic and hostile, but yet hasn't started throwing rocks or burning things. Yeah, we had a young man, or at least you think he was a young man, that spray painted the church. I wished he learned how to spell God a little bit better. His spelling was no goos and no masters. I think he needed a D on the end. And while that was the actions of a young, foolish individual, there has been times in our histories where churches and places of worship have actually been spray painted to identify you as someone hostile to the regime because you hold to a truthful message. See, we have developed a casualness with the world in America because we haven't been attacked by anybody in America. No one has walked into this church, taken your wife and kids, beaten and tortured you, sold your kids into slavery to be whatever it is to whoever they sold it to, tortured your wife, and then taken everything you've owned. And Paul's addressing people where that may have just as well happened to. And he tells them, stand firm in the spirit of unity and fight as one man. And there are places all around the world where Christians' families are taken and sold, and they will never see those family members again. And horrific things get done to them. And when we take that message of, if you come to Jesus, your life is going to get better, they're going to look at you like you're nuts. The purpose is that we stand together as one entity for one purpose, for one idea, for one goal. Anything that gets in the way, TV, sports, blah, 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 derails that one thing. Every soldier knows that in battle, the guy to their right and left is the guy that's going to get them home. Not the guy in the rear, not the guy with... The guys with them are going to get them home. And they'll do everything they can to get them home. Striving with one mind, side by side, for the gospel, for the faith of the gospel. Our goal is to take the gospel message. We have the truth. We have the light. And our responsibility is to take it into the world for a sole purpose, knowing we will lose friends, knowing we will get blocked on Facebook, knowing you may lose business, knowing you may lose family members. I told you the story about one of Stephanie and my friends from seminary that blocked us. I didn't do anything. I got blocked on Facebook. Well, I didn't do anything that time and got blocked on Facebook. Why? Why? Do not be frightened by anything of your opponent. Don't worry what they're going to... This is written by a man who's in jail, by a man who is going to face the magistrate, by a man that eventually is going to go to Caesar, by a man who's already been beaten for the gospel message. Do not be afraid of the attack of the enemy. But you understand, I've got a lot of stuff. Yeah, I understand. Don't be afraid of the gospel message. Don't be afraid of the enemy that comes against you. But you don't understand. I got a large family. Yeah, I got it. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 34, the writer of Hebrews encourages the folks as they stood, and as the passage says, watched, catch this, catch the phraseology, watched joyfully as their possessions were plundered from them, because they understood they had a greater possession in Jesus Christ. That sounds nuts. They watched joyfully. This is how our culture looks at it. That's crazy. They watched joyfully as their possessions were stolen from them by the governmental officials. Because what? They understood something that a lot of folks in the church today do not. They had a grander possession in Jesus Christ. All those things that they had were meaningless compared to the joy of knowing Christ. Paul, I believe, says that somewhere. I'll let you look that one up. Stand as one. Well, I've got a lot of things. Lose it. That's what Jesus says to the rich young ruler. These things I've kept, my Lord, since I was a young man. Oh, well, there's one thing that you lack. Go and sell everything you have and give to the poor. Then he went away happy because he was a broke man. It'd be great if that passage said that. No, he said he went away sad because he was a man of great possessions. See, our things sometimes keep us from being able to fight as one unit. Our things keep us from being able to fight as one individual, because the things that we've invested our life in getting, when push comes to shove, are really ethereal things and have no real intrinsic value beyond it's a thing. But you have a relationship with Jesus Christ that you starve so you can feed the thing. Paul says no. Paul says you feed the relationship with Jesus Christ, then live in a manner worthy of the gospel message, not worthy of the stuff. The stuff is great. It makes life comfortable. I'm glad we have AC, even though if it were up to me, it'd be a few degrees cooler, ladies. We've got some wool blankets in the attic. I can break those out for you. The stuff, there's nothing wrong with stuff. Oh, here he is. He's about stuff and tithing. No, I'm not about stuff and tithing this Sunday. That'll come later. But the stuff is the things that distract us from a life worthy of the manner of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that keeps us from being of one spirit, that prevents us from fighting side by side. That's what happens. The politics involved, the pettiness involved, the rights, I owed this nature involved, are the things that derail the church from being effective. And Paul's trying to tell them, as he's telling us, that if we allow those things to continue, or if we have those things in our life, or if we bear grudges against our brothers and sisters and have not dealt with them, we are a derailed people and have no purpose, because we will not fight effectively. It's like watching some of the guys that the enemy brings in, and they give them an AK-47 and they say, go shoot at these guys. And their soul training, well, on one, the soul training was they handed the dude the weapon. He racked back on the action and started shooting, and he shot between two dudes, and then they ended up beating him up, and he learned not to shoot between two dudes again. Our purpose as an army is to fight as one purpose, and that one purpose is the gospel message. Let's take a look and see where it's at. See where he concludes out in it. Do not be frightened by anything by your opponents. Paul's already said, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. That should be our war cry. Why? Because once that comes into our life, we have nothing left to worry about. The stuff can go. For me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Through my death or through my life, Christ is glorified, period. You cannot stop an individual like that. You cannot stop a church like that. And for a church not to be embraced that as its sole model is for a church to slowly grind to a halt. To be buffaloed by the opponents. Our culture today uses a lot of things to buffalo the church. We don't talk religion and politics, and so we don't. Well, you're a bunch of bigots. You're a bunch of homophobes. Your God is an evil and angry God. I can't believe a God that would do that. You're a bunch of simpletons. Don't you all know that Christianity is a fairy tale? I don't believe in your God. It matters not what you believe. Your knowledge of God or belief in Him does not alter His existence or His lack of existence. He exists in and of His own statement, whether you choose to believe Him or not. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction. One of the best things that you'll ever know is when someone attacks you verbally for a position that you have, you know that they are at the end of their argument. If you ever get on Facebook and watch people debate, I know when I've got you. When you start calling me names, you've lost. You know why? Because if you had anything left other than name calling, you would use it. They know by your stance that their destruction is assured. If you look at your adversary and say, for me to live is Christ, but if I die, it's gain, the adversary can do nothing to you. He knows whether he kills you or you live is irrelevant because that message will continue on either through your martyrdom or through your proclamation. Either way, he's lost. And it's a sign to the enemy they have been defeated. But we have been buffaloed to where we don't talk religion and we don't talk politics, and we've been buffaloed into silence. Because we're afraid of losing people. And we're afraid of saying something that would offend a friend, when the best thing to do is to say something and they be offended. Because there are things that are just wrong. And there are things that are an affront to a holy God, despite the friendship that you have. They know that they have lost when they deal with an individual who looks at them and says, in my life or in my death, Christ will be honored. Do your worst. That's what Paul is telling the church of Philippians. That's what Paul is telling the church of today in a culture that is about ready to swing in a very dangerous direction. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation. And that from God. That tacit determination that says, you may slay me, but you will not stop my message. For it has been granted, verse 29, it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ, you should not only believe in Him, and we stop right there, because we like that part. It's been granted to you for the sake of Christ that you believe in Christ. Yay! We stop there. We don't want to keep reading because there's a but there. And usually when there's a but for something that says some good news and then there's a but, that's kind of like when someone says, honey, I've got some good news, but. Guys, which would you rather hear first, the cheery good news or the but? I'd like to hear the but because I know the but is going to totally just wipe out the cheery good news. Right? Have you ever noticed that? But also suffer for His sake. And we like that first half. Yes, it is for our sake, for us to believe in Jesus Christ. Yay! Great stuff! This is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say in the fiery furnace. O King, live forever. Our God can deliver us from the furnace. put that in your pipe and smoke it. We're done here. I think the new phraseology is drop the mic. Boop. Yeah, I'm street. I'm so old school. Back in my day, we just called it school.
Don't hurry him.
We love those statements. The problem is both of those statements have a but clause. And in both of those, they requires true commitment. But even if he doesn't, we're not bowing the knee. It is for your sake to believe in Jesus Christ. But it's also for your sake to suffer. Suffering in our world is the equivalent of going to HEB and go, they're out of AA eggs. Lord, why? They're out of AA egg. Or what is it? I don't know. Okay, I don't buy the eggs. Grade A, AA, whatever. They're out. For me to live is Christ. And to die is gain. I'll have to buy brown eggs. Brown eggs. I suffered for Jesus today. And you'll tell everybody in Sunday school, and we'll pray for you. And we'll put hands on you, and Lord, help those brown eggs. Have you ever noticed how when we pray about people who are ill, it's always, Lord, take it away. Lord, take this illness away. Take it away. Take it away. Take it away. Take it away. Why? We're a pain-it-verse culture. Sometimes the importance of the illness is strengthen them as they go through. Deliver them as they walk through it. It is for your sake to know Christ. It's also for your sake that you will suffer. Period. We in America have not suffered as the church in the world has. We may soon very well will. And it will define who sheep are and who goats are. And it will define the true church. And your life and how you live it now when there is no persecution will define the life that you live when there is. These people suffered. They had all that they had worked for stolen from them, especially when you go read the account of what happens in Rome in the book of Hebrews. They had it all taken away. Some of them went to jail. If you go back and read Fox's Book of Martyrs, and you go all the way back through church history and see how many Christians went into the arena, and the only way they could get the animals to kill them is to starve the animals or poke the animals with a stick and agitate them to kill people who refused to fight the animals. But see, we don't like that part of the Bible. That message. Come to Jesus and suffer. At the end of the service, we're going to invite you to come down and have a relationship with Jesus Christ so that when you go out here, you'll suffer. Is not a contemporary message for the church. But it is the message in the Bible. See, we sugarcoat, we water it down. But the fact of the matter is, folks, contending for the faith is going to have consequences and risks and losses. And if the consequences, the risks, and losses are too high, then you won't pay that price. And then you're not walking a life worthy of that of Christ. Imagine if Christ in the garden had said this, I'm not doing it. And since we're all co-equal, it ain't happening. Have you seen these filthy pagans? They all deserve death. I'm going to make sure they get it. Have you know what's happening? One of my own is going to sell me out for a couple of pieces of bling so that he can then go hang himself. I'm not going to do it. These people deserve exactly what you're going to do to them. I'm not doing it. But what was his response instead? Father, let this cup pass from me, but even not. Even if you choose not to. Nevertheless, not what? My will. But your will be done. See, we love the opportunity of loving Jesus. We have a problem when it comes to the commitment side of loving Jesus. Because that means we put the my will and thy will on different planes. Engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had and now hear that is still here have. This church was one of the first ones that ran Paul out of town. Paul had to leave. He was arrested here. We have the story of the conversion of the Philippian jailer and the household that was baptized with the Philippian jailer. But he had to soon leave due to not Jewish persecution. This is one of the few places where the Jews did not have a strong foothold. We know this from Acts, I believe it's chapter 16, because Paul went down to the river and met, and that's where he ended up meeting some other folks, Lydia, a seller of purple. And the reason why they met down at the river is because they didn't have enough males to form a synagogue, and then the required number for that is 10. So it's a very small Jewish population. The persecution at this is coming from Roman citizens, and we talked about this early on, and if you missed it, it's on video on the webpage. Let's take this back. What's the purpose of what Paul's talking about? When we claim the name Christian, we claim all that goes with it. The life that is to be walked in a worthy manner of the gospel of Jesus Christ. A gospel message that is to bring single-pointed unity to the body, not just this church, but all of Christendom should unite under a single-pointed purpose. That's his point. But yet we are divided and fractured, and even folks in our own denomination are willing to sell us out to stay with the culture. But a life worthy of the manner of the sacrifice of Christ has a single-pointed purpose of fellowship that even means that if it requires the full commitment of our life, we joyfully do that. That's the terminology Paul is using in this text. I rejoice. I am joyful. I am glad to hear of these reports, even from prison. That we contend for the faith as side by side, or fight as one entity, one man. Because suffering is part and parcel of the Christian life. If we divorce suffering from that of the life of the believer, we have a half-truth gospel. What's the point? What's the purpose? How sold out are we? I'll be honest with you folks, it'll be hard for me to joyfully watch as someone takes my possessions out of my house. You're apt to get the business end of my firearms. I just be honest with you. I look at that, when I read that passage, I go, I don't know how they did it. I know how they did it. I know why they did it. The text tells us because they understood they had a greater possession in Jesus Christ. And I believe that as well, but I worked hard for those things. And that's the tension that we have as believers. That's the price that we have to contemplate. And so the question that we ask ourselves, or that we need to ask ourselves, just like we asked last week, is, could I look at all that I have and be joyful that it goes because it's just stuff, knowing that my relationship with Jesus Christ is so wonderfully great that even if they chop me in pieces, I'm still singing praises to Him. Or if they burn me at the stake, I can sing praises to God as John Huss did, Or would I be thinking about the loss of all the stuff? Where's our relationship on that scale? Where's your relationship on that scale? I'd love to tell you that mine is over here, that I could sit while being chopped into little pieces and burned alive, that I could sing joyfully to Christ. But I don't know. First of all, I've never been burned alive, and secondly, I've never been chopped into little pieces. But there's a part of me that wonders about the stuff. And that reflects something about my own personal life. And I bet if we were to poll everybody, please, for God's sakes, do not raise your hand. Poll each and every one of us here. How many of us could land on that continuum? Can we honestly look in the mirror and say, I'm prepared for the sake of Christ to suffer. I'm prepared for the sake of Christ to fight side by side with my fellow brothers and sisters for a single-pointed purpose. And if it costs me my life, my friends, my family, my all, the relationship I have with Jesus Christ is better than all that I have in this earthly realm. Can we say it? And then, can we mean it? As the praise band comes this morning, we're going to have two young individuals that are beginning their process down the road of this life of Christ. Back in July, they came down the aisle at youth camp and professed Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And now they're coming to follow Him in believer's baptism. And so as the praise band sings, if you'll stand and join us, we'll follow the ordinance of baptism